Welcome everybody to the Real Dealz podcast, one of the top-ranked real estate investing podcasts for the last 7 years. This is the place to be for investing strategies you can actually use, expert interviews, and of course, some good old-fashioned entertainment. Now, here's your host for the show, Elliot, the REI guy, Smith.
What's going on, Real Dealz podcast listeners? Welcome to another episode, and this is a good week for me. So I'm pretty excited to do the intro here and talk a little bit about what's going on in our world before we get into the show, which the show this week was really cool. I had a good buddy of mine, Jared Fielding, he's a local here in Tri-Cities. He's been flipping for 24 years here. He's a little bit older than I am. And we run the local real estate meetup together. And so we did a real estate meetup last night, actually at his house, because we couldn't get a spot that would allow people inside, I guess, whatever. So we did it at his house, and we had a lot of things going really good. And we're like, man, we should do a podcast. And so it's not an interview. It's just really, we're talking about these things that we talked about last night a little bit. But it was funny because one of the guys at the meetup, when we were talking, we brought up professionalism a lot. We were talking about some of the new restrictions in Washington State, some of the new rental tenant laws, which are crazy, all these things. And so one of the key themes last night was professionalism. And like being a professional business. And so we talked about this a lot. And one of the guys in the front row is like PPP. And I'm like, what? He's like professional proactive planning. So what we did, we took that, I'm stealing from it. Maybe I can be Brandon Turner, like the Burr strategy, and I can take it and I'll have to give credit to him, but I can write a book and call it PPP. So I thought it was really cool. So we really dive into what it is to be professional and what it isn't to be professional in this business, what it means to be proactive and not be proactive in running a real estate investment business, and then planning, and not only planning for success, but planning for failures and how you cover your backside. So it was great because it wasn't an interview. Jared and I soundboard off each other really well. We have conversations like this all the time, whether we're looking at a property or we're looking at moving to a commercial deal or whatever we're doing, or just personal things in general. We sit there. I mean, the first time we hung out 2 years ago, we sat at lunch for like 3 hours talking. And so we really have good chemistry in that sense. And so the soundboarding was really good. And he has a lot of good points and experiences. And so I think we meshed really well. So I think you're really going to enjoy the show this week. A couple of things going on in our world. We closed on the 25 unit in Richland this last Friday. We're 50-50 on that with one other partner. We went and got a loan from Freddie Mac. The terms were really good. It was basically a 75% LTV loan, 3.92% interest, 30-year AM, 10-year term, but we can float for the next 10 years. And we got 2 years of interest only on that loan. And so they didn't require much. It was the easiest loan I've ever done in my life, other than it just took a while for, the appraisals and Freddie's underwriting and these things, but they really didn't underwrite us that much. And it made me think throughout this deal, and my partner as well. My dad always used to say it's easier to get $5 million than it is to get less than $1 million. And I'm like, that can't be true. It was true. Literally, we didn't get a $5 million loan, but we went up in value. So they based the value off of the asset itself being a performing asset. They did want to know that our net worth was equal to or greater than the property. They did want a personal financial statement and some management experience, or else they would have made us hire a property management company. But it wasn't that hard. We just sent them a personal financial statement. They didn't ask for seasoning of funds. They didn't ask for any of this stuff. So if you're looking at scaling in any way, I would definitely look at going upstream. Freddie Mac does it. I think it's 1 to 7 million loan amount. So purchase price has to be more, but loan amount for small balance loans. So we closed on that. And then we had our first tenant call on, Monday. Somebody clogged the toilet and couldn't get it unclogged, or maintenance guy couldn't get it unclogged. They must have shoved something down there. And so that was a deal that we had to deal with. I didn't deal with. Actually, our new executive assistant, an office manager, she actually ended up stepping up to the plate and dealing with it at like 11 o'clock at night. And then she showed up to the work the next day at 9 in the morning. So pretty excited about her. She's doing really good. She's picking up things really quick. She also had another surprise this week in one of our other properties that we own a quarter of that we manage though. And one of the tenants had died. Somebody did a welfare check. Somebody had on this older tenant, and he had passed away in the property. So it's pretty sad. And the property, he kind of hoarded stuff. And so we'll have to clean that out and deal with all that. But first time dealing with that, that's an experience. You have to hold things back for so many days, and just Chrissy's dealing with most of it. But yeah, that was sad, but that happens. Another thing, Washington State passed some of these stupid rental laws. We're now probably worse than California in a lot of ways. And Jared talked about it a lot last night at our meetup. And I don't handle the rentals that much, but basically you have to give 60-day notices. You have to change your leases around. You can't go to month because then they can stay in the property. Raising rents, you got to give notices, all like way more notices. It's just some of these things. And like, you can't do no cause evictions, the selling, you have to, if you want to sell your property, you have to give proper notice, but you also have to list it with a realtor at market value and leave it on the market for so many days. And then people that are making 200% of the median income. So I think it was 52,000, or not median, the poverty line, federal poverty line income. So it's like 52,000. Anybody at that 52,000 and under now gets free lawyers automatically from the state, which is paid for by the person that's evicting them if they lose. So they have no incentive, or the state, these guys have no incentive to not rack up your bills. And so it's going to make things really hard. There are probably going to be a lot of unintended consequences of the people that are trying to help actually hurting them. And so it's just interesting because we talk about this a lot tonight about being proactive, or in this podcast, being proactive. But the idea that I always have is, Christy was really like, this sucks. This is frustrating. Why do they keep doing these things? With change, there's always opportunity. So when things change, the way the market works shifts. Free market capitalism will always find a way to win, no matter what, until they take free market capitalism out. Money needs to make more money. Money needs to find a home. Capitalism will prevail. And so you just have to find out the different path that the money's taking, or the easier path to make that money work for you. So things change, you can go, there's an opportunity to build something new. One of the things that they, with the 1031 that we talked about is, can you condoize your multifamily deal, right? So things, there's certain ways to make this all work in a roundabout way. You just got to figure it out. So look at this new changes, or all these things that are sucking that we don't like. One, start putting money behind people that are going to go fight them. If you don't like it, go put your money behind it, because yeah, you can run, but we keep running, people are going to keep voting certain ways, and things are going to keep evolving. And so you got to fight them in a lot of ways. So put your money behind those people, whether it's $5 or $5,000, whatever. Back good congressman, get out there and do your part. I have never been that involved, but I'm preaching it now, and I'm going to start finding ways that I can help donate and help make a change, because I like owning rentals in Washington. I don't want to have to sell them all, but if they make it so challenging, we have no other choice. So, but other than that, guys, the show's a little longer today, but we just got into a really good flow. I think there is so many clips I could take out of there and put on my Instagram, because there's just so much good advice. Like, I was making mental notes. I was taking some notes of things that Jared said. I was learning, and that's really all it was. It was a growth session for both of us to talk about these things that we had a set topic on. So hope you like this week's show, and I'll catch you guys next time. Here's our sponsor.
All right, Real Dealz podcast listeners, I want to talk quickly about our show's sponsor, Iron Bridge Lending. If you guys have not reached out to Iron Bridge already to talk to them about funding some of your upcoming flip projects, I highly encourage you to do so. I've known the owner of Iron Bridge for a very long time. I've personally borrowed millions of dollars from them over the years to do a number of different projects, and I can say without a doubt, they are the best hard money lending company I have ever come across, and that is the reason why they are the sole sponsor of this show. I've had a lot of other companies reach out to me and want to sponsor this show, but I just won't do it. I feel like I need to be genuine in who we have sponsoring the show, and it needs to be somebody that I've personally done a ton of business with. So I personally vouch for their ability to be the best, hands down, in the world of hard money lending. You won't find better programs, you won't find better terms, and they're lending or will be lending in over 20 states. So chances are, if you're hearing this in whatever state you're in, it's definitely worth it to check out their website, reach out to them, see if they're lending in your state, and if they are, I would absolutely encourage you to do business with them. Another very cool thing to note is that they have a program for most rehabs where you can actually borrow up to 90% of the purchase price. Now, this is given the fact that you are actually buying a deal, which if you're listening to the show, that means you probably are. But if you have an actual deal on the table, they'll fund up to 90% of your purchase price, and they'll even give you rehab funds on top of that, which means that it only takes 10% down to get into a project, which is unbelievable in the hard money world. So do yourself a favor, reach out to Iron Bridge Lending, have a conversation with them, see if they're a good fit for you and for your next project. I can guarantee you that you'll be happy that you did.
All right, what's going on, Real Dealz podcast listeners? Elliot Smith here for episode 371. Little show, last week we did the monologue show, and I really want to gear more towards that in a lot of ways. We're still going to get interviews on here, but today I have my good buddy Jared Fielding. He was actually the episode that we had in March that got lost from our new studio, but we are here in our new studio today, giving it a second try. So today we both have run a local real estate meetup in Tri-Cities, and last night we had our first meetup in like 15 months, and we went really well back and forth on things, and we had one of our guys show up that had this great saying. It was PPP. It was professional proactive planning, and this whole night was about professionalism and about these things. So Jared and I were like, shoot, we should record a podcast about this. So Jared's here. Jared, why don't you tell people really quick who you are, so give them some credibility of why you know what you're doing, and go ahead and get in here. No, you go ahead and tell them.
Nothing like bragging about yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
So I've been doing real estate investing since I was 19. I dropped out of college, flipped my first house. I made like 43 grand on the first deal. Back then, I'm 43 now, so that was like an enormous amount of money.
Yeah, way back then.
Way back then.
Right?
So I mean, that's like 24
years ago.
24 years, right. Yeah. So retired when I was 31. Did that for a couple years. That was fun. And then the truth is that gets boring. So now I kind of have this like great, and you get to see this like work balance, life balance, where I love competing and winning. And at the same time, I don't like to work 60 plus hours a week, 70 hours a week anymore.
Totally. How many houses have you flipped?
Oh,
you had to put a number on it.
400, 350, let's say.
Okay. So, and you have a good handful of rentals.
Yep. Life's
good. You don't need to work, but you're doing it because it's fun.
Yep.
Perfect. All right. So Jared is well qualified. The great thing about Jared and I'm, as you guys know, I've talked about before, I'm the go. Tucker likes to call me all gas, no brakes, constantly going. And I don't really look at the little things, the details. I'm not a detail-oriented person. Chrissy's always been that for me. Jared is Chrissy in a lot of senses. He builds systems. He builds processes. He is very analytical and thinks about things and knows how to build a really solid business. I mean, he's told me before that he was down in South America while somebody was buying a house at auction that he never drove, he never saw, and he has systems in place to buy that house at a certain dollar and no more, no less, depending on where the auction goes, but really good at building systems and processes. And we've stolen a lot of things from you, like your rehab list, your material list was well put together. So anyway, so we're going to talk today about professional proactive planning, PPP. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to start with professional, and we're going to kind of both say what that means to us. But I've talked about it before, guys. This business is growing up. I used to run the hobby business where I could work 10 to 15 hours a week, flip, 25 houses a year and live a good life, run it as a hobby, only go after the low hanging fruit. This is changing. In this market environment, you have to be professional and run this like a business, no matter what level. If you're doing 1 or 2 houses, a year, or you're doing 200 houses a year, you have to run it the same. So why don't we jump into that? Why don't you start off, Jared, with what does running a professional business mean to you?
Right. So if I can, I think I'm going to do the opposite. Okay. I'm going to say what unprofessional, because I think sometimes I think people end up doing I don't know why I'm fat. Well, if I was trying to get fat, I would do these things. And it turns out I'm actually doing those things. I just didn't think about it that way.
Exactly.
So I think sometimes it's easy to define by what it's not. And so I think how you dress. So if you show up in flip-flops and shorts, that works sometimes. I mean, you and I are that way. I'm often the one guy at auction that's dressed like that. But there's certain environments where if you show up to commercial property, I don't dress that way.
Correct.
I also think the way that you talk, some people can just dominate conversation, not let anybody get a word in edgewise. That's a big deal. And the one that we were talking about right before we started the show is I think communication and follow-up is a really big one. At the end of the day, if you dress casual and you're super relaxed, but if you're on point in when you communicate, and when you say, hey, I'm going to text you tomorrow, and you text me tomorrow, I'm like, all right, here's a dude that does what he says. But if you flake out 2 or 3 times, what I know is I don't trust what you say.
Correct.
So if I don't trust you on the small things, it's really hard to think that you're ever going to make any real money.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, I totally agree. I've dressed in gym clothes to appointments,
Yeah.
but I also have dressed with a nice shirt, nice jeans, nice shorts, hair done to other appointments.
Yep.
Because I figured out who's my clientele before I show up, and how I dress could be off-putting one way or another. If I go to a suit and a tie in a low-income neighborhood with somebody that is not working a job and then wants to sell their house that they just inherited, they're going to probably get intimidated if I'm there in a suit and a tie driving up. But if I'm there in my gym clothes, I'm just a normal guy just like them. That matters. Now, flip that script. Say I go to a $2 million multifamily or commercial building to a guy that's a professional, and I show up in gym clothes and a tank top.
Right.
They're going to say, this guy is not taking this seriously. I'm not going to waste my time. Right. I don't have time for this because a professional person doesn't have time. So I think that's highly important.
I think you did a good job distinguishing, like, read the environment.
Correct.
I mean, I remember I drove a house and I showed up in gym shorts, like just sweats. And the guy looked at me and he was like, I asked him later why he sold me the house. And he's like, you didn't feel like a shark.
Yeah.
And everybody else is showing up in these, like, real intimidating ways. And if you show up like a human, that's knowing that situation.
Correct. You have to know, because you're setting the lead already, so you should be able to figure out who that person is. Right. Similar, Jared and I, we get a call on their Wednesday night or Thursday night, actually. Commercial property is going to foreclosure Friday. Mm-hmm. They need help. It's 5:00 at night, snowing outside. I show up, it's by my house. I show up in sweatpants and a sweatshirt. Jared shows up in the same thing. However, that time and point right then, it mattered almost that we were dressed down, because we're here the guys here to help you.
Right.
We're not here to take advantage of you. We're not slick back. We're just normal guys that can do this deal, and we don't care what you think about us, but you're calling us for help and we can help you. Right. But if we show up, differently, it matters how you present yourself. Same, like you said, when I showed up in gym shorts with those people down in Hermiston, bought this deal for like $57,000 in Hermiston. Killed it on this deal. But I showed up in my gym clothes, and the lady's like, oh, I thought you'd be dressed in a suit. I'm like, I'm just a normal guy like you. Yeah. And she's like, immediately you can see the nervousness or the defensiveness melt away. Right. So that matters. But what you also said something there, like what you say you're going to do matters, right? Why don't you talk a little bit about more like that?
So we were talking about before, I had some guy come by to offer fiber to my house. And he's kind of like, hey, what do you do for a living? Because I've got a decent house, with a view of the river. And so he's kind of like, hey, I want to know what do you do? Yeah, I want to know you. And I kind of want to like copy and paste whatever you did. And I was like, oh, I do real estate. And he's like, oh, I just got my realtor's license. And I was like, oh, cool. So I get his card and he's like, yeah, we're going to have fiber to you at this date. And I'm like, great. So then he emails me the next day and he's like, hey, some things came up. I'll get back to you in 3 weeks. So 5 weeks later, I email him and I'm like, hey, bro, what happened? What happened? And because he gave me both his realtor card and his professional card. And he's like, oh, I'll have an answer for you by tomorrow. So it doesn't show up, doesn't text the next day tomorrow, doesn't email either. And then by the third day, I email him back and I'm like, hey, you get to A-game your communication. And he wrote back and he's like, you're absolutely right. And he's like, I put a reminder in my phone. But this guy kind of impressed me when he first showed up to my door, kind of had that hustler, that young hustle attitude. And I was like, oh, I kind of like this kid. That's why I got his card. And then watching him kind of flake out 3 times in a row, I can already probably tell you how his real estate business is doing.
Yeah, he's still working for the fiber company. So obviously not very well, right? So, and where this plays into, if you guys are sourcing, most people are here listening are trying to source deals off market. So where that plays into, these things matter. I had a call with this deal I was trying to buy, and the guy we were texting last night, he's like, hey, can we call tonight? And I was doing our meetup and I couldn't do it. I'm like, hey, no, but I'm free tomorrow from 8:30 to 9:30. What works for you? And he said, I'll call you around 8:45 to 9:15. It was about 9 o'clock. I texted him, hey, just so you know, I'm ready. I'm waiting for you. I don't want to be rude because I'm right on the front end of what he said, but I'm here. I'm ready. And that call went well, in the sense that I didn't buy the deal, but it went well, right? It's being on time. Or when we say we're going to follow up with somebody, hey, can I follow up with you every month, Mr. Seller? Well, I'm going to follow up with them every month. I'm going to be on time.
Right.
Or Mr. Seller, I'm going to get an offer to you by tomorrow. Okay, that offers to them by tonight, if not tomorrow. Right?
Can I interject on that?
Yeah.
So I think that used to be something I struggled with, and I had a friend that was just brilliant at it. And I hired her for a while, and she finally was just like, hey, let me coach you on this. And she's like, put a reminder in your... I was like, how do you remember all this?
Yeah.
Am I allowed to swear on this?
Yeah, you can swear.
Okay, yeah, how do I remember all this shit? Because I think I have a good memory, but she's killing me.
Yeah.
And she used to text me reminders.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's crap. I'm an adult. I can figure out how to remember my own shit. And she's like, oh, I just put reminders in my phone. And I know, as simple as that sounds, at some point when you're a business owner, lots of things come up.
Yeah.
And it takes seconds to be like, hey, at 3:00, you have this call, set a reminder an hour before, set a reminder 20 minutes before. Mm-hmm. So you're the person that when you say you'll do it, and they're getting bombarded by other potential buyers,
right.
You're the one that like followed up exactly when you said.
Yep, exactly. 100%. Couldn't agree more. Because when we're going in, guys, we're in the tightest market we've probably ever seen in our lifetime.
Yep.
Probably ever in the history of real estate in the U.S. So I beat people all the time, not because my offer is the most money, but because they trust me more.
Yeah.
And you build trust and a level of professionalism. They know that they have confidence that I can close and I'm going to be better than the guy. And I do that a couple of ways. One, if I'm going to flip it myself, I put $10,000 non-refundable down at closing after I walk through. Unless I need an inspection. Then I tell them I'm going to have an inspection because of this XXX. And I say, this is what I'm looking for, XXXX, setting proper expectations. And then I do that really quickly. I call in a favor from a buddy. Hey, I don't do very many inspections. I pay, make sure it's there, make sure it's communicated very well ahead of time. Then I also...
And to build on that, what you're doing is you're saying, this is what I'm going to do. And then I go do it.
Exactly. And how do I do it? And then I go through this, I continue with that process all the way through. And so they trust me more. And then I also sit there and I take a step back and I explain the process. A lot of times, like you made a comment earlier about bulldozing over people. When you're doing this game and you're talking to sellers all the time, you tend to forget that they probably have only sold 1 to 5 houses ever in their lifetime.
Right.
If ever sold a house. Or, obviously they bought a house or they inherited a house and they don't know what they're doing. So you have to understand, yeah, it might be common knowledge to you, or you can sit there and talk to a seller and be like, the ARV is this. I always love it when people are sitting there and they're talking about ARV in front of somebody or this or that. Most 99% of people don't know what that means if you're not in the real estate game. And so explain it to somebody like you would a child. Like, you need a step-by-step, easy, digestible things. And then what action steps are you required, Mr. Seller, if anything? And what action steps am I going to have? And what is the process going to be? And then those timelines hit every time. Or say you have
and sometimes if they don't, for something comes up, you're the person that communicated before.
Well beforehand.
Yep.
Mr. Seller, the inspector had something come up. He's going to be late or he can't come until tomorrow. What time works for you, Mr. Seller? Or whatever that is. Or we're going on an appointment. What my team does, if I'm going on an appointment, my team calls them an hour beforehand and says, Mr. Seller, Elliot's coming over on an appointment. Just letting you know, see if you're still good and if you have everything you need, and is there anything else we can do for you? We just want to follow up with you, but they will be there. So they're ready and prepared. Hey, because people forget too, right? They might forget as well. So we give them that friendly reminder. Then just the consistent following up with people through the process. Not everybody's going to be a deal first phone call. And so are you that consistent person that touches them every single week or bi-weekly or whatever? Maybe their price is unrealistic at this time. And I have this saying that I say to people all the time. So especially with cold calling or things like that, if you're reaching out to somebody there and say, I called you, Jared, and I said, hey, Jared, I want to buy your Tesla. And you're going to say, well, I wasn't thinking about selling my Tesla, but how much you want to pay me, right? You're going to want more than market value probably at that point, just because off the cuff, that's what you're saying. I wasn't thinking about it. Well, if I keep following up with you bi-weekly or whatever, and I'm talking to you, and I'm just not calling to harass you, I'm just shoot the shit a little bit. Then I come to find out you have a 4th kid on the way, and your wife says you need to sell the Tesla and go buy a minivan. Who are they going to go with? The guy that's been following up with them every 2 weeks and built a relationship with them over time.
Well, and on top of it, I probably don't want to sell the Tesla.
Yeah.
Right? But if you're the person that calls and I haven't gone around to posting it because I don't want to, and I'm like, well, that means I don't have to do anything.
Yeah, this
is easy. He wants it. He's motivated. Yeah. And I could just solve this problem and not have to work.
Exactly. So professionalism matters in a lot of different ways.
Right. And the follow-up, so the first house I did, the one I mentioned at the beginning of the show, that was a perfect example of that. Literally, you got to imagine I'm a 19-year-old kid. I don't know up from down. What I have is I'm really good at follow through. I'm really good at details. And I did exactly what you're talking about. I just kept following up with this guy who was out of town, and he rented his house to his kid, who then, of course, doesn't care to pay rent because it's freeloading.
Yeah.
And he's just trying to work through it until he finally, like, his give a shit breaks.
Yep.
And I'm the one person. I mean, I bought this thing for like 40%. Like a crazy, my first house was a crazy home run. And I asked later, I was like, why me? And he's like, you were the consistent person.
Correct. Exactly. And I'm going to flip this. If
I can add to that.
Yeah.
Think about it. If I wouldn't have got that house, like that house is what basically just hit my bloodstream like a drug. I was like, oh my gosh,
yeah.
43 grand to a 19-year-old kid 24 years ago. That happened because I was consistent. And now I got to retire and have all these things. What if I wouldn't have done that?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I followed up with this guy for a long time.
Probably working at Walmart. So, and I'm going to flip this another way. So maybe you haven't done your first deal yet and you're like, I need to find a mentor, or you see these people that are like, you need a website, you need this and an LLC and all these things. You don't need that shit. You just need to talk to people. But what you need is you need somebody like a Jared or a me in your market that is out there doing it, that knows these things, that remembers what it was like to get started. Yeah. Now, if you call them, I get people call me all the time. They're like, hey, can I take you out to coffee? No, I don't drink coffee. And no, I don't want to do this because you're just going to waste an hour of my time. Right. It's not going to go anywhere. Perfect example. I have calls with people all the time on the call center. They're not ready for it. I say, hey, do this, this, and this. Come back in 2 months. I'll give you another free hour of time. So you can translate this professionalism, though, into finding a mentor. Yep. If you go to somebody and say, hey, Jared, I have this lead. It's 80 cents, 80% of Zillow. Will you help me work it? And then you follow through with everything you say you're going to do. Not only are you going to pay them for that and teach them, but you're going to want to help them. That's how I got my first mentor. That's how I got my second partner mentor. That's how I'm doing it in development. I'm finding guys and I'm bringing value to them, but I'm on the ball. I do things that they don't want to do to make their life easier, and I do it on time and they don't have to bug me, and it's a benefit. Then they want to help you.
Right.
So you can be professional and not have to have this business, but just be professional with what you're doing in every sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And if I can add, so mentor, I got a mentor when before I got that first house, and I can't emphasize what you're saying is like so key. So she did exactly what you're saying. I was like, hey, can I take you to coffee? No.
Yeah.
Can I take you to lunch? No. Dinner, breakfast, like water, like what the hell goes in you that I can give, like, and she just kept saying no. And I'm like, right, I probably was harassing. Like I probably called her 30 plus times, and she wasn't going to waste her time. And I'm sure she got hit up a ton. And so I basically baked a cake. I knew where she was a realtor, went and said like, I don't even have a lot of money. Thanks in advance for any help you're willing to give.
Yeah.
Finally, she's like, who the hell is this kid?
Yeah.
Sat down. That changed my life.
Yep.
And as soon as she was willing to give me that time, white on rice.
Yep.
Like she's like, oh, I'm struggling with, digitalizing my Quicken stuff. She didn't have Quicken. I went and bought her Quicken.
Yeah. Installed
it on her computer, solved the problem for her.
Yeah.
So it's that, to your point, like do whatever it takes, add value, because they're who you want to be 10 or 15 years from now. Yeah. They can save half your learning curve.
Yeah. And value doesn't mean money all the time. Mm-hmm. My first mentor, first thing he said to me, don't ever ask me for money. I'll never give it to you. So what did I add value to him? I just called and told him about the deals. Because like you said earlier on, this is a drug. Once you start doing this, it's a drug. Yeah. Any guy in the game, they want to know about deals. They love the chase. It's all about the chase. So I started talking to him, and he answered more and more over time because I was just telling him about the deals that I was doing and what I was doing. He's like, give me a pointer here and there. Everybody loved hearing about it. But then finally, he's like, you know what? You're giving too many good deals away. Here's $300,000. Go buy one of these flips and do it yourself. That's just how it works. The other mentor, I brought a deal to the table, right? So there's different value. When we first started talking and becoming friends, there was other value that we traded, that we showed that there was value there. And so anyway, let's move on to proactive. So being proactive in this business, what does that mean?
Right. So we talked about professional, proactive. Let's do it again. I like defining by the opposite.
Yeah.
What is it not? What it's not is every time something comes up, you're responding. You're reacting to it, which means that I can tell you don't have systems, that your life is probably consistently in crisis. You were saying earlier, and I super agree, what's the definition of a real business? It's one that has systems. What's the difference between a mom and pop hardware store and Home Depot? Systems. That's it. Yeah. So every time I meet somebody and I'm like, hey, let's talk about your systems. And if their eyes kind of glaze, I'm like, oh, I know I know where you're at in your development.
Yeah.
And to your point, as soon as I decided like, hey, I want to have a business that makes me a ton of money and I actually don't want to spend a lot of time doing it, what does it take to do that? Literally systems.
Yeah, systems. Like one system that we had early on when I was working in France, I hired a VA to listen to all my phone calls and make notes for me because would forget to put notes in for these things. So I knew when to follow up, and they would make schedules or calendar things on my calendar. You need to follow up with this person this time because you said that. But I was working 70 hours a week at France. I didn't have time to go back and make all these notes. I was driving. So I put a system in place to help me do those things, right? Or Chrissy has built a lot of systems and checklists and things like that of how we do different processes. Mm-hmm. Another thing being proactive, or I would say what not being proactive is, would be on the marketing side. Say you're sending out marketing and you're like, say you just sent out a bunch of direct mail and you're sitting there waiting for the phone to ring. So you're being reactive at that point, just waiting for the phone to ring. Why aren't you calling people while you're waiting, calling Driving for Dollars list and starting to get the phone ring, start talking to people, start building momentum and being proactive and searching out leads? Because then all of a sudden you're in that zone when those direct mail leads start coming in or whatever lead source you have coming in. So you're being proactive and you started. And momentum is a crazy thing. I read this really good book by Darren Hardy, and it was called The Entrepreneur Roller Coaster. And he talks about Mo. They call it Mo. Momentum is real in this business, and it flows like a freaking roller coaster. That's why I call it a roller coaster, because that's what it is. And when you're riding that momentum, when you start, you have to get in motion to start that. And then when you go, you just ride it as long as you can. But if you're sitting there waiting, well, you're not starting until that phone actually rings, and then you're not ready. And you might have missed opportunities because you're not being proactive, searching out these things and putting it into the universe that you're buying houses on a discount.
So I super agree with that. I see people that like, I've mentored people that you can feel the difference when you're between somebody who's waiting for the phone to ring. Mm-hmm. They kind of like, oh, when a deal comes up. And then you have the other people that are like, I'm going to go shake a deal out of some tree or bush. And that mentality creates, one tends to die. Yeah. My experience is I can almost tell this is a person that won't make it. Because
never make it.
They're waiting. They just kind of have their hands like this and they're waiting. Yeah. Versus the other person has this, I'm going to do whatever it takes. And they create their own momentum. So some little success they get then leads to, I see this with realtors. I saw it with my brother-in-law. He like did all the hard work chasing all these like really difficult leads, but then he killed that one person, did great. Then that person leads to 2. Those 2 lead to like 4, then all of a sudden.
And you're like that penny thing they say. Would you rather have $1 million now or double a penny every day for 31 days, right? It just grows on itself in so many ways. And really, you might think you're being proactive by sending out direct mail, but you have time in between that direct mail or whatever to start the momentum, start the snowball working, doing something else. Perfect example that I always...
And sometimes it's okay to fail. Like people are always like, if you're coming from a W-2 mindset, you're like, if I'm not getting paid for exactly what I'm doing, or I don't see an exact result. We had this conversation last week. You're like, I'm doing a lot of things. Some of them won't hit. Yeah, but some will really hit big.
Exactly.
And I think there's some people that have the mindset of, unless I can see how this is going to hit.
Quantify this.
Yeah. I think that somebody's calling, so they're a hot lead. I'm not going to do anything.
Yeah.
And the irony is you got to be willing to chase a ton of things and know a bunch aren't going to hit.
Yeah. With having systems, because you can't chase a ton of things and not have systems. Like, I couldn't do all the things I'm doing right now without Chrissy and Tony and Carissa and all these people that are on my team to help me get focused. What am I really good at? And at first, you're going to have to do a lot more things, right? But as you get going, you just have to do a couple things really, really well, but that has to build over time. And so one of the thoughts that I was having when you were talking is a good example of being proactive. Say you're driving property. Say you're a foreclosure buyer like you were, right? You bought at the foreclosure, and one of my partners, they bought at foreclosure every Friday. So normally what they do is they drive the properties once a week or if they're going to go, and they get an idea for the property. So you're being proactive for your buying on Friday, right? But while you're driving those properties, how many times did you stop and door knock somebody and look at a house, or you picked up another property? You're like, I think this is coming up in like a month. Why don't I'm going to be right by here. Why don't I door knock that house?
100%.
Right? Because you're driving from point A to point B already. Well, there's something in the middle. Right. Let's give it a shot. It takes 2 minutes to stop and drop and not door knock a house. Or you're driving home from work and you just sent out direct mail. You're waiting for a call and you're driving home from work and you're excited. You're like, man, this is going to work. Well, there's a shitty house. Maybe you look on this, pull over, look on the county assessor, see if it's a rental or they live there. If they live there, go knock on the door. If it's a rental, go drive to their house, see if it's on your way home and drive to their house and knock on their door. Do you want to sell this rental? I mean, it's very simple things that add up to a lot.
The gain momentum, that build the momentum.
Build momentum. And so it's funny, Brandon Turner talked about this the other week about the hockey stick, right? And so people will they'll start building these businesses and they're going to go, and then they'll start to get a little bit of traction, and then they'll go to the next thing, right? They'll start doing really well. Finally, they'll go to the next thing. Instead of letting this is a hockey stick. And I am starting to see that. And I use the catapult analogy, right? I started talking about this all last year. Like last year sucked for us in a lot of ways, but it was really good in more ways than it wasn't. So we started the call center. We got Tony going, and I was doing all this work, and I wasn't making shit, and we weren't buying any flips because I was putting all this effort into the call center and these other things and development, all this stuff, and we weren't making any money because we didn't have as many flips, and it's like shit. We were buying these rentals, and I'm like, shit, we're putting money into these things, and I'm like, this is like loading a catapult. I'm sitting there pulling the wheel down. I'm pulling that big boulder down. And I don't know how long it's going to take me. It's taken. But as soon as I get to the bottom, there's a point when you hit the bottom and you're like, shit, something's right. And you push that button and that thing takes off like an effing rocket, right? That's what this is. And it could take 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. Right. But you have to be committed, because if you don't pull it down all the way, it's not going to shoot as far.
Right. So that first house that I got, that I was saying, I was 6 months before I got it. Mm-hmm. So you talk about I'm again learning. So I'm watching VHS back then, trying to teach myself all this. I'm down at Lowe's building lists, I'm doing so many things that in retrospect, I'm like, that made no sense. Yeah. Right. I would never do that again. But it was built. It was just doing everything I could to load that thing up
and get you in the mindset
and get that. So then I'm just absorbed in it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's just really, and so right now in my life, I told Jared last night, funny story. I was with this call center. We're building the data side of this business out, and there was this one data side thing that I needed to get, that I wanted to get, this type of list and these type of records, and I couldn't get them. I emailed this company that's more nationwide, emailed them multiple times. It's been in the back of my head, I need to figure out how to get this people. And I've had a lot of really, really, really good things happen in the last 2 weeks, but it's been in the back of my head. I sent them just getting, how do I get these people who want to talk to me? Go to Jared's house last night. He's got a guy that's helping him or learning to be a realtor, and Jared's kind of mentoring and whatever. And so I'm talking to the guy. I'm like, so what do you do? He's like, oh, I just moved here from California and I work for such and such company. And I'm like, what company? He's like, such and such company. And I'm like, I've been trying to get a hold of your company for 4 freaking months because I want to do X, Y, Z. Oh yeah, I can help you with that. I can put you in the right direction with the right person. I might even be the right person. Because I'm out there doing things that might seem like they're not the best thing ever or whatever, but I'm putting it out there. The universe is providing. And it's just, I came home and told Chrissy, and I'm like, I don't know what it is, if I'm just getting really lucky or what. I'm just waiting for the shoe to drop. But things just keep falling into place at the right time from all the actions that I've taken over the last 12 months. And even, my whole career, but the relationships are starting to pay off. The friendships that I've sent the masterminds that I'm going to, the people I've met, those things are paying off in a huge way. And it's actually mind-boggling when you're into this, how those things snowball. And I am right here, I think, in the bottom, going up in this hockey stick, and it is going to be a roller coaster, and it's going to go. I think it's going to go to the moon.
Right. And I think the thing that we hit on is, are you absorbed in it?
Yeah.
Are you living and breathing all the things all the time? Or are you just with your hands reacting, waiting?
Yeah, I didn't want to do that not stupid, but I didn't want to do that meetup last night. I literally have so many things going on. The last thing on my mind is doing a freaking meetup.
Or bringing name tags.
And freaking, I had one job, bring name tags. But doing the meetup. But you know what I got out of that? I got that guy that I met. I met another guy that's a doctor that is looking to place capital, and I actually have I'm raising, I have doctors that want to put money with me, and I'm like, hey, you should be part of this group or whatever, and come listen to this thing. I met the PPP guy. You got that for a great podcast. I think it's a great way to put this in, and then we built a better relationship. So there's no quantifiable value to that time last night, but the value is exponential in so many ways, right? Right. So, and that was us being proactive, putting our time out there and being proactive and being immersed in this business, in this community.
Last thing I want to add on the proactive part is we talked about systems. I think that's a key part of being proactive. I also think people tend to run their personal life different than their business life. Mm-hmm. So they'll have systems for their business, but then their personal life is just this huge time suck. So one of the things that I hate is grocery shopping. For whatever reason, I ate that at like a 9.5. And so that was one of the first things I realized I could delegate. So when you start running your business like a business, you realize that there's a whole lot of things in your personal life that you could also delegate. So I would just throw out there, like, really, a lot of people are like, if you're short on time. Yep. I mean, when you're working 70 hours a week, you're looking for, how do I buy 10 hours?
Yep.
Literally find a way to buy 10 hours.
Yep. Or just being efficient in what you're doing. And I was actually going to do a post on this about, so health. Health is a big thing. Mm-hmm. I need to be at optimal levels at all time.
Right.
Now, I probably need to eat better. That's probably my one weakness. I don't drink pop. I don't drink beer, alcohol. I don't drink those things. But I just probably don't eat that great. I have a huge protein smoothie with tons of crazy good stuff in there every morning. Good, though. Yeah, I look good. Yeah. I'm feeling a lot better. But I need to go to the gym last year. And so the first thing I thought is, I've tried to go to the gym by myself so many times. You know, I did the CrossFit with you. It didn't really didn't like it a ton. But I tried to go to the gym, and when I go there, I just don't know what to do. I get there and I'm like, oh, I'll do a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And then I end up like, oh, I got to go, or I end up staying longer. So what I did, I hired a trainer. So I have a one-on-one trainer 5 days a week. I don't miss gym sessions. And I don't miss it for a couple of reasons. One, I don't want to go to the gym every day at 7:30. I actually really don't ever want to go to the gym. It's not like something I enjoy, but I know I need to do it, and I actually enjoy the benefits of it. Mm-hmm. But one, I don't want to let him down. I don't want him to show up and he'll still get paid, but I don't want to show up and then he shows up and I don't show up. Right. So, and I want somebody to be efficient. Hey, I can only be here for 45 minutes a day. Let's be the most efficient as possible. Hey, my back is hurting. Can we work other things around it? Like, I wouldn't know how to do those things. Second, I just hired a couple weeks ago a counselor, and I had a good counseling session. I have counseling twice a week, and it's expensive. It's like $500, $250, $20, $25 every session for an hour. But I was talking to her today, and I was stressed because I couldn't sleep last night. I woke up early. I came to the office an hour before I went to the gym, which I never do. But I just have a lot.
What are you stressed about?
Oh, just going on with everything that going on. We were super late last night. I missed Monday. I'm leaving out of town next week, and I just got a lot of stuff to do. So I'm like, I need to take care of people. I have that. I want to be professional, and so I never want to let people down. And so I want to always do what I say I'm going to do. And if I can't do it, I'm going to go. I stress about it. So we're doing that. Then we have a meeting with our development partner, and we're going, and I'm just like frazzled. I'm going from thing to thing, and I go to the counseling session, and she's like, we take the first 10 minutes, and I just sit there, and I just breathe, and I just decompress. And then we talk about these things. And we talk about not always personal stuff. I mean, a lot of it is, but it's like, it's just that moment for her to say, ground yourself in this. Let's slow down and think about what's going on in your life, and really just be grounded in the moment. And it's like a freaking reset. Like, literally, I'm like, why haven't I done this sooner? Because I immediately felt better. I immediately was in a better mood. I didn't have all this anxiety. And that's why people meditate, right? But I also need somebody to help walk me through things, because I won't do them on my own. So if I have somebody that I have to be there for, that I don't want to let down, I'm a people pleaser, I don't want to let them down, then we can do that. And then we talked about, I'm going on this trip to New York next week. And it's a lot of big wig guys. I don't know. I mean, I know how I got invited, but I feel very fortunate, but I'm stressed because I tend to struggle with, trying to tell people how good I am, or all these things, so I can feel like I can blend in this environment. Oh, I belong here. So we talked about that. How do I handle that situation? If I get in that thing, how do we do this? Can I call you if I need to? How do I handle it? And just ground me. And we went over a whole plan. We practiced how to be grounded. And so it's very interesting.
Out of curiosity, what's that plan then?
The plan is just like, okay, I need to breathe a lot throughout the day. So take a couple minutes, just sit here and 3 deep breaths and go down, because I'm very high energy. So just slow myself down a little bit. And then
I can even feel that change just by doing that.
And then also when I'm sitting there and I might be getting stress or anxiety in a chair or whatever, or even standing, sit there and just sit there for a minute and think about your feet being grounded to the earth, and just breathe a little bit. You don't have to do it in a weird way so people know. You just sit there and breathe. You can be still engaged maybe a little bit in the conversation, but feel your feet on the earth, feel your feet on the ground. Just be grounded. Bring yourself back instead of trying to think in your head, oh, am I saying this right? Am I saying this wrong? Am I doing this wrong? What am I doing? Just, you're here. You're here for a reason. They want you to be here. Just be there. And so it was really fascinating. So there I am. I got the trainer. which is probably, that's like, $1,200 a month. So that's what, $300 a week. I got her at $500 a week. And then I'm also trying to hire somebody to do my laundry. I don't want to do that. And these things, and they're actually allowing me to be way more present in the times that I do have and being way more efficient.
Right. 100%. So and I appreciate the confidentiality, but we actually use the same counselor.
Yeah.
And so I kind of want to destigmatize that for a second, because I appreciate you brought it up. I would say most of the people that I know that are high performing really prioritize health, and they really prioritize their own inner stuff, which is exactly what you're talking about. The irony is that you go to these big meetings, and if you don't have your kind of inner shit put together, those issues show up.
Correct.
And to your point about like just sitting there and breathing, that seems really obvious after you say it. But when you're in that,
you don't think about it.
You don't think about it. And so that's why you need a trainer to help coach you through some things.
Yep.
And at some point, maybe in, however period of time, you might be like, hey, I kind of got this. Or maybe I still want the accountability. But I think hiring people that are really good at the thing, and it's investing, right? We're really
same with
investing.
any masterminds or joining the DFA that we're in, Tucker's group, that I've been in for 7 years. I mean, it was $200 a month, and I have made more friends and value out of that group than I have on so many things, or other masterminds that I'm a part of, where I hired a life coach last year, and he got me out of my shit. I don't even need
I remember that. You were kind of just like,
I was depressed. I was sleeping 16 hours a day. I didn't know what to do. I was just like, this sucks.
You felt circular.
Yeah. I was like, what am I supposed to do? Like, I'm bored with flipping houses and this. We started going and get some resistance. And then all of a sudden, COVID hits and there's resistance. But then by September, I don't even need him anymore. I talk to him every now and then, but now I'm moving on to a counselor who can help me with some more mental things that I think are on a different level.
Right. And again, that's the proactive part.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I think people wait for like a total meltdown crisis in their health or a total meltdown crisis with their emotions, and then they have to deal with it. Correct. Versus the A players are the ones that are like, hey, I think I'll do better if I do this. And it looks like they're spending money, but you find the people that spent the money on a counselor, spent the money on like a personal trainer. Yeah. They'll never not, like, that's such a good investment. If you could say, go back, would you take your money back to go back to where you were?
Never. I tell people all the time with Jason, he was actually going to be on the show this week, but we had to reschedule. I've said, I'm glad I don't have to pay you off of the performance the future revenue that you help create.
Right.
Because that would be very expensive. So
he was
a life coach. Yeah. But even I was talking to our counselor today at the end, I'm like, I really appreciate this because I'm on a rocket ship right now, and I need somebody to help keep me grounded that has no financial gain, no investment other than they just want what's best for me, and I can bounce things off. They don't judge you she doesn't judge in any way. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, what am I building this life for? Am I building it for influence? Am I building it for this? Okay, say I get influence. What am I going to do with that influence? Would I be just as happy buying a farm and being retired? Let's have these conversations so you can always stay grounded. They know who you are, and help bring you back to where you need to be when you need to be there, right? When you're not. So it was very, very good today. And it's just funny how those little things, that proactive, I need this, helps you so much.
And I think some people can be cheap. Yeah. It's easy. I mean, you were just talking about the expense. I mean, I do counseling too, and it's a lot of money.
Cheap is expensive.
Yeah.
Because I had multiple counselors that I've gone to. I went to a guy, paid him like $700 for like 5 sessions or whatever. Literally throughout
technically cheper.
Cheaper.
Right. Yeah.
Literally, even into session 5, the guy's like, "Yeah, this is back when I was struggling before I hired Jason." He's like, "Yeah, you're just like a picture of somebody that doesn't have any purpose in life." Okay, let's figure that out. We talked about this on the first one.
Right. What am I going to do with that?
The next one, and there was never any growth.
Right.
And it's like I just wasted. Not only my time, the money, it doesn't even matter at the time. What's my hours worth? I wasted 5 hours plus driving there to go to these freaking sessions. Waste of money, you know? So hiring, this is why I told her, I'm like, I would pay you $500 an hour because you're worth that. Just charge everybody else that. But like, I think it's worth that. So spend money where it matters. That's like, we talked about earlier, everybody says, oh, you need to get an LLC, you need to get a website, you need to get all these CRMs and all these fancy things. No. You don't need those yet. You just can use a Google Drive. You can use a phone number. You don't need a website. You know how many people? Yeah, my website helps sometimes, but you just need to talk to people.
Yeah, you helps you a lot more than any website.
Yeah. You helps you. Be proactive. Go learn how to talk to people.
Right, and I feel I was having this conversation with Patrick. I was like, at some point, I'm all for planning, right? Which is going to be our next one, but you can mentally masturbate your way into no action.
Yep.
And I was like, you're at the spot where I really don't want you to do like any more of this like spinning thing. Now we got to go.
Yeah.
So
do the hard things. If you're putting it off and like, I'll do that later.
Yeah.
I need this first.
Yeah. I want to build the website.
Flip those. Whatever you're saying, I need this first, but I can do this later. No, flip them. You need to do the other thing first because your mind mentally says that's hard.
Yes.
And I could fail. Yes. I could have a failure, and it's scary.
It's easy to build a website. Yeah. I can sit at home, run some Netflix in the background, and build a website for 6 months. Yeah, exactly. It's really awkward to go knock on some guy's door and be like, "Hey, your yard looks like shit. Are you interested in selling?" Exactly. And then have the guy be like, "What the fuck?" Like, that sounds way less fun. That's what makes money.
Exactly. Yeah. My mouth makes me money. And literally, so what do I need to do? I need to get right in my head, and I need to get better at talking. And how do I have better conversations? How do I flow this conversation? How do I learn this? I'm reading books after books after books. I'm listening to podcasts. I'm listening to our show, hopefully, with the calls. Like I do recorded calls, sales calls, and I'll go over and, guys will send them in, and I'll go like, you should have done this, this, this. I actually would go listen to my calls afterwards so I could critique myself. That's being proactive so I can be better on the next call. So anyway, let's hop into the next one, planning. I think this one is probably so important, but we have to be careful because people get stuck in planning stage. Mm-hmm. So what does not planning look like to you? See, I did it right that time.
You did.
You weren't expecting that.
Yeah, it's because I'm not expecting. I'm like, well, shit. It's not being ready for that question.
You wrote it down, so you should have planned that I was going to ask you that question.
Right. Well, so let me use an example of. I think a lot of people, when they're mentally masturbating, plan on how they're going to get rich.
Yep. And
I call it looking up, like how rich they're going to be in their future self, while they get clipped in the knees.
Yeah.
So I had a multi-millionaire attorney sit down and be like, yeah, let's not. If you do the right things, rich is what comes.
Yep.
Let's talk about how you plan for. Let's talk about how you're going to lose everything. And he created a game where we would sit down and figure out. How are you going to lose all your shit? And we would, then what it would be is like taking your life, if it was a bucket, and spinning it around and looking at all the sides of it and saying, where are the holes that you don't take the time in a normal like 60-hour week to stare at?
Yep.
And so we would take like an hour or two every 6 months and figure out how are you going to lose everything and then plan for it. So the best example was back in 07, 08, right? When all the easiest money in the world, right? You could get like a non-owner occ HELOC signature in 7 days.
Yep.
It was ridiculous. I mean, bless Washington Mutual. So it was impossible at that time to imagine the banks cutting lines of credit. Literally impossible.
Yeah.
And that attorney was like, hey, what if they did cut lines? And I'm like, well, but what impact? My life is built on lines of credit. What impact would you have? And I'm like, well, we would need a backup line of credit.
Yeah.
So we created a backup line of credit at a bank down the street from my main bank. And I remember when I went in and I'm like, hey, I need to pull this amount of money. They're like, you don't have it available. And like, I'm like, yeah.
To the first bank.
Yeah, to my main bank.
Yeah.
Like everybody in that bank knows my name. I'm there every Friday. Like I pull like 13 different checks. We have a system. We know exactly what we're doing. And
you're buying an auction, you have to take, say you're maybe there's $1 million worth of houses that are coming up. You're taking $1 million with you. Incremented so you can have the exact amount, knowing that you might only get one or two.
Right, but you need to be able to play it in a variety. It's like a permutation thing.
Yeah.
So turns out that Washington Mutual just cut my line. Never been late. Like perfect credit. They just decided unilaterally to cut it. And I remember being like, it's 9:40, auctions at 10. This house opened for less than half of what it was. Like huge home run out in Badger. Yeah. So it's the first house I made $100,000 on, and I made like 99,500 being really exact. So
thank you. You always tell me that. Make sure you're exact when I talk about my rentals.
Yeah, be really transparent.
Yeah. So, we manage 66 stores, but we own a quarter of this one and half of this one, and yeah.
Because I appreciate like back to like honesty and credibility, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm sitting here freaking out. Like they didn't even tell their bank manager. Bank manager calls headquarters. They're like, what the hell? This is like one of our best clients. And hands are tied. Can't do anything.
It's across the board.
Yeah.
Everybody's cut.
Yep. And I'm the first person to learn about it with. And I'm like, holy fuck. Like, this is like, at that point in my life, the biggest deal for me. And sure enough, I'm like, oh my God, I actually thought this could happen. We played this game, went down to the bank, yanked the money.
So you went to the other second man.
Yeah, went to the second bank, ran in, actually got the money, raced to auction, bought the house. I remember it was, I think it was in that Christmas break time, so nobody else showed up.
Gotcha.
Back to consistency, crushed this deal.
Yeah.
So again, I think sometimes I think people only plan for success. I think there's also a value, especially as you accumulate more and more money, of saying like, hey, can you play the game of how do you plan for losing things so you protect yourself, which then helps you stay rich.
So it's like people say, they tell people all the time, like, go to college, get a good job, it's safe and secure. How many people just lost their job last year, right? How many people lost their job in 08, 09? They didn't plan it. They have their bills. They go get a brand new car payment. They get a new house. They have another car payment. They have all these bills that are right at their income level. 60% of Americans don't have $1,000 in their savings account. And, this might be, that was maybe last year's stat, but let's say whatever, same thing. Most people couldn't cover $1,000 expense if it came up right away. Yeah. So you have these and you're planning that everything's going to go perfect. Not what happens if you get hurt? What happens if you get hurt off the job and you can't go to work? What happens, if you have a sick kid or something happens, you haven't planned and set things aside. Guys would always go to, when I was working at France, guys would always go to the level of their income. So they get a new route. So they go from $80,000 to $90,000. Without fail, within the next month, they're driving a brand new car. Yep. Without fail. And I remember one of my sales managers one time said, when somebody bought a house, he said, got him. It was a newer guy that we liked and we want to keep. And you always are worried because it's really freaking hard work. But went and bought a house. Got him. That was exactly what he said. Because they knew as soon as you're tied to those payments, it's handcuffs. Yep. So speaking on the planning.
Can I just really emphasize? I think Elliot just hit. I just want to say it again because I think you hit just such a key point. Like the second that you have a bunch of consistent payments that max out, pretty close to max out where you are handcuffed. Yeah. And you're handcuffed for not a couple months. You're handcuffed for years.
Yeah. Literally. Christy and I make on average a couple $100,000 to let's say $400,000 a year based on the year since we've been doing this. We live in a house that we bought and fixed up ourselves. Our mortgage payment is $1,200 a month. Literally, we could go buy. We're approved for over $1 million. We could go do that right now. We live in a house that's $1,200 a month that will turn into a rental. And we've lived in 7 houses that we've turned them all into rentals, maybe 5. But anyway, we've kept them and they've been great rentals and we've lived there and they've been some of our best performing rentals. I bought a new truck this year, but I bought it off my AMC winnings, but would have never sold my 2015 F-150 that I had bought cash. Right. My wife, Chrissy, is still driving a 2011 Subaru Legacy, not because I haven't told her go buy this car or go buy a Tesla, but she's waiting for this Rivian that wants to come out, but we're being patient and we were going to pay cash for it. Now people will say, well, you could use that money a lot smarter. Yes, but I'm planning to fail because I can go work at 7-Eleven and cover my payments. Right. If the world came down and crashed around me, I can go to 7-Eleven right now and cover my payments. Now we are going to look at building a house, but we will have a plan for that. Another scenario.
So just to inject, look at what Elliot's doing. You're planning for failure. Yeah. What happens if this happens, and this happens? I'm still good. Yep. Now, in a weird way, it's like your psyche frees up. Yep. And now you actually make more money.
Correct. Yeah. So another example, we have 9 doors, so 2 duplexes and 7 single families that we own 100%. And we bought them, like I said, over the years. One of the first one was Chrissy bought it in 2010. It was her first house at 20. It's still a rental for us today. We owe $60 on it. We've talked about paying it off and maybe put it in HELOC. Yeah. But we rate in term, we refied, and one of them was a duplex that we bird, but we refied everything in December. By the way, our timing was impeccable on this. I'm just going to say we're in the 2s on rentals, 30 years. But everybody, we have 40, our debt on those, our LTV on those is probably 45% loan to value. So our loans are probably 45% to, if not more, of the value. So we have 55% of equity in this portfolio. Those we own all ourselves. They cash flow really well. We can cover all our expenses if the world goes to shit. I had multiple people ask me, why didn't you pull cash out? Because money is so cheap, it's free money. Why didn't you pull cash out and leverage them? Mm. And I said,
I love you bringing this up.
I would have liked to, but if the world goes to shit, it's very unlikely that it's going to drop more than 50%. I'm still good. I can still get out of these. if it goes down and rents stay the same, I can cover all my bills with these rents. I'm not leveraging. Now, where I am leveraging myself is on the 24 unit, the 25 unit, the 8 unit. Those other ones I'm buying with partners, but I'm spreading my risk because I'm buying them with partners. So, and they're 75% LTV. They're good loans, right? We're not 90 or over leveraged. But this is my safety net. So what are my safety nets? I have 2 safety nets
100%.
now. So say the world goes to shit, and say I lost all my rentals for whatever reason.
All of them?
Say I lost all of them, even the safety net one. Say it went really shit. I still have my house. I can go work at 7-Eleven.
Right.
Say the world only goes half to shit, and I keep my rentals, my 7. Maybe I lose the commercial, the 24 units or whatever. Say those goes tits up or whatever.
Yep.
One, those are non-recourse.
Yeah.
Well, one of them's non-recourse. The other ones, are business, and we have partners that we can help spread that burden. But I have 7 rentals with equity in them and a really, really good cash flow that can cover all my expenses plus some.
Right.
So there's a safety net there. And I know you have done this really well because you have 25 rentals that you could live off of, right? And
That I do, yeah.
but that you do live off of. But are you leveraged 100% LTV? Are you pulling cash out, living a high life? I mean, why? I mean, it's the same idea.
Yeah.
We're planning to fail.
Yeah. I would say that I'm just hesitant to say what my LTV is, but
Well, it doesn't matter. It's low.
yeah, really, really low. I would say that my passive income is 3x what my living expenses are. So at one point it was hey, I retired when it kind of crossed over that threshold, and I was really excited that I didn't have to work.
Yeah.
And then you start realizing oh, that's great. That's a lot of freedom. And what happens if rent drops, by 25 or 30%?
Yeah.
Oh, well then I'm not going to be retired, and I still got money in the bank, but so then my goal was 2x.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you get to 3x, you realize that there's some spot where things get really, really shitty, and it doesn't matter. You're still retired.
Yeah.
Or you still have freedom and flexibility or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think, but you get there. So when COVID hit, it was really interesting because I have some variety of friends that are millionaires, and talking when things looked like it might turn into this Italy, New York, the whole world might melt down. They were we can survive 3 months of rents not coming in. And I'm you're a multimillionaire. And they're yeah, but we're leveraged. The way they set themselves up, they didn't have, you were just talking about, a backup plan. Mm-hmm. The plan was this is going to work, and it can't not work. That would never happen. Mm-hmm. And they just in my opinion, luck. I mean, that bullet came down and just happened to curve in a direction that COVID could have gone in a variety of different ways.
It curved and took out the freaking retail hospitality industry, not the residential industry.
Right. So the fact that they got creamed and not another demographic,
just luck.
It was just luck. Right. I see a lot of businesses go under, and people were oh, well, they weren't strong businesses. No, they just got basically the way the laws went down,
But they might have been a good business.
Yep.
Without a plan of what happens. Right. And so that's the key thing here is my plan is I hear people all the time. I want to go buy rentals. I want to go flip houses or wholesale houses so I can get enough capital to then go buy rentals and then go retire. Right. That's what everybody tends to say whenever I'm meeting with people, newer people. That's the dream. That's the progression. Well, you're going to find that retirement gets boring after a while, especially if you're in your 30s. You've got to be doing something to a certain extent. But how are you planning for the hiccups and the road bumps along the way? So one thing, once you get, you start wholesaling, and people always quit their job way too soon. We saved up over 15 months of income, not living expenses, income.
So you got runway.
Runway. So I can plan. I got to build the momentum, right? It goes back to professional. We got to build the momentum. And so if I have that, so we plan, and I worked my ass off in it, I have delayed gratification. And a lot of what we're talking about is delaying gratification, mm-hmm. which this world's not, doesn't like to do. And I don't either. That's why Christy's really good at it, but I still do it. So they say they do this. Well, they don't plan enough money for marketing for 6-12 months, and they do different marketing. They don't have enough money behind them. Okay. But then say they get their first flip. Well, what's happening right now in the market? Whoever thought lumber was going to be 10x what it was last year? I mean, roughly 5x, I guess. But let's say, who thought that you weren't going to be able to get half these supplies? Who thought you weren't going to be able to get cars because of the chip shortage? Who ever thought that? Nobody planned for that. But so what's going to happen? Your house that you thought was going to take you 3 months and cost you $40,000 to rehab, now all of a sudden costs you $60,000 and it's taking you six months, which is more holding costs and more expenses. Did you plan for that? Did you have a buffer built in? So my rehab, if I said it was going to be a $40,000 rehab, my plan is always it's going to be a $50,000 or $60,000 rehab. What is it going to sell for? Oh, am I planning for the shoot the moon price? Or am I planning for, I know I can sell this in a minute price? I'm planning for, I know I can sell this in a minute price and hoping for the best. So that's why we have never lost money on a deal. And our spreads are generally really big. But when we do have issues, which we do, we had a $25,000 issue on a house where we had septic, or we had a sewer line and we had to redo it, the sewer line, and we had a friggin', oil tank, all these things. It cost us like $25,000 extra. We still made $50,000 because we planned.
Right.
We planned to fuck up and for things to go wrong because they just go wrong.
And then because you planned for it, they rarely do.
Correct.
That's the irony is that the people that I had somebody say, oh, you're pessimistic, you're planning for shit to go wrong, therefore it'll go wrong. And I'm like, well, obviously you don't make a lot of, you haven't done very much.
Yeah.
Because it's the people that actually plan for it to go wrong that it rarely actually happens to.
Because you're looking out for those things.
Yeah,
you catch them before they become a thing.
Yeah, it's the people that look up on how they're going to get rich, they get clipped in the knees.
Yeah.
It's the ones that are always watching out for their weak spots that they rarely get hit there.
It's like I said this to you last night. I'm like, shit, things are going really, really good. And I'm just wondering, where is it going to go wrong? So I'm literally, my brain is thinking, not that I think all of a sudden the world is going to go against me.
Right.
I'm just thinking, where does this go wrong? What point of this, this thing that we have built goes wrong? Does my call center shut down? Does my data provider kick me off? Yep. Do I have a backup? What is my backup plan?
Yes, and that's what you're doing. You're not saying oh, how's everything going to go wrong? I'm going to get in this super negative mindset. You're trying to say, how could it go wrong? Kind of like the bank thing. And how do I solve it?
Yeah, exactly.
To the planning point, it's not like you're just going to sit there and wallow in it. You're going to plan for an alternative to that.
Correct. Yeah.
So then when the bank all of a sudden does something unilaterally, or if something changes in your life that you didn't see coming, or COVID happens, you're like, well, didn't plan for COVID, but I planned for something to go wrong.
Yeah. Like the only reason I was depressed last year during COVID was not, we could have been done. I didn't need to work. It wasn't that I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be freaking poor when everything, we thought the world was going to be, shit the bed. But I was depressed because I didn't get to do anything. Because I shut my marketing down because people were negatively responding more than I thought. I don't like upsetting people. And so I was disappointed because I shut down, not because I was worried about not making any money or not being able to live. That was never, ever, ever a worry in my mind. Not one time.
And I would say that it's not a worry because you're living in a house that's way below your means, at that time in a car that's way below your means. And so if you were maxed out, that might have felt really different.
Yeah, I'd be stressed.
Super
I have
stressed.
to buy houses. I have to sell 2 houses a month. I have to flip 2 houses a month to keep this machine running, to pay for this overhead and this employee and my payment and my house payment and all these things. Like my break even's 2 flips a month. Well, so I got to do 4 to actually make money. But then all of a sudden you start doing 4 and then all of a sudden your break even becomes 4 houses.
Right.
And look at now. Now the backside of COVID is nobody can find deals. And so it's like, because it's such a tight market. So did you plan for that? Did you plan, if I couldn't find deals, what's my pivot? I think that's a really key word is what is the pivot? There's always a pivot, right? If you're, you watch good basketball players, right? They get stuck in a trap. What's their pivot? Their pivot is knowing their outlet guy that's driving to the hoop because there's a one guy short because they're a 2-man trap. What's their pivot? They get on their thing. That's why they call it a pivot foot. I started to go one way, but then all of a sudden I pivot back to the other way because that way is no good. Right. But you have to practice and know your pivot.
And we've been talking about planning in almost a negative way, right? Plan for these bad things to go happen. I think one of the other things, and I'm doing this with somebody this week, is to sit down and say, let's do an income projection over 5 years to 10 years and start guessing how many rentals are you going to add? How's your income likely to grow? Because what they're going to see that they haven't realized yet is they're going to have a tax problem.
Yeah.
So now, losing things is planning for a problem, but you also have to plan the other direction.
You have to plan for good things to happen.
You have to plan for good things to happen too. And so that's when you start saying oh man, if I just stay taking all this income on a personal return, I mean, at some point I'm going to be paying more in taxes than I live on.
Yeah.
So I think part of it too is making sure that you plan both directions.
Yeah. So perfect example of that. Back in November, December, I started seeing the writing on the wall that call center was going to do good and we are going to start doing a lot of cool things. Wasn't there yet, I called my accountant. I paid him $2,000 and I said, go figure out, I think I'm going to make X next year, and go figure out how I need to be planning for paying taxes on X, or how do I minimize taxes?
Amen.
I haven't made X next year,
right?
But I really think worst case, I lose $2,000 because I don't make X. But best case, I make X or more, and I have a plan in place. Yeah. I was telling him, do we go offshore? There's that nomad capitalist guy, right? Do you take things offshore? How do you structure these things? Where's the LLC go? How do I put this here? Do I do retirement accounts? Do I do a solo and 4K? Figure it out. Do I do cost segregation on my rentals? Is this a good time? You're smarter than me.
Right.
Go figure it out for me, please. Literally at one point, I had the attorney that's $600 an hour, your attorney friend, and my accountant that I just paid $2,000, that's probably $500 an hour, on the phone call at the same time. That 1 hour call probably cost me over $1,000, but they were both there. Here's his side to explain my stuff. Here's his side to explain my stuff. You guys figure out a plan, and we'll kind of interject here and there.
Right.
But you guys are smarter than me. And I think...
And the part of that is the planning part, right? Because I remember getting to the end of a really good year and my tax person being like, I wish you'd have had this conversation with me 6 months ago. Because 6 months ago, I could have set some stuff up in place where this would have been a way different tax bill.
Yep.
And so it's kind of like saying which is the smarter approach like you just did, that taught me. Like, next year and for the rest of my life, I'll make that mistake once. I will always keep touching base. I mean, at some points, I'll do tax planning almost monthly. If I'm having a really, really good year, I will keep reviewing because the plan can get out of date. So I think planning ahead, especially with taxes and income, and
because things change all the time.
Things change all the time. Sometimes they're way up and you didn't expect it.
Or you have cost segregation that's phasing out. Well, you need to take advantage of it this year,
right?
Because it's starting to phase out over the next years. Another thing is we were doing that, that fun thing that I said is Ellie's Light Your Money on Fire group that might pay off. And I'm like, hey, we're going to kind of wing this, but let me call my attorney to make sure the plan's in place. If this goes really well, what do we do? And he's like, you need to make sure you have it under this. Well, that's simple. Let's make sure we have it under an EIN number instead of somebody's social security number.
Right.
Well, let's not do all the document, the full on thing, because that's with buddies I trust. But we have a plan. We already got the baseline. We can do everything later, right? And if it becomes a thing. But we have a plan in place, so when it becomes a thing, we have a plan.
Yeah.
We know exactly what we need to do. We need to form this partnership agreement with this thing and this thing and this thing, and then everything's planned.
And I appreciate that you thought that up, because I went to sleep and it whenever there's something loose, my head will grab it. And I was like, I don't think we've thought through this one piece. And so it was cool when you came over to be like, hey, I talked to my attorney about, and I was like, that was exactly what that was a loose end. That's important. It's a real critical one.
Yeah, because we would have had a tax problem. We would have had
a variety of problems.
We would have had a variety of problems, but it was a simple phone call. I called my accountant. I actually called you. He didn't answer right away, so I called your dad because he's a tax attorney. Yeah. And he didn't answer. He called me back, but then I figured it out with my accountant. But I'm like, and then when I need to solve something, I'm on it. I'm right on it. I need to figure it out right now, get it done, get it off my list.
Right. And notice when we talked about being proactive with health, counseling, we're often working with other people. Yep. And when we talk about planning, we're also working with other people.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're only doing this in a vacuum by yourself, you're going to get a fraction of the value.
Yeah.
I mean, just sometimes soundboarding in our relationship really helps.
We have looked at multiple deals where you come over, and you and Chrissy are very similar. You both have your laptops out and your spreadsheets, and I'm more of a feel type of person. I can run the numbers in my head, get a baseline understanding. And so but we sit there and we soundboard. What's the worst thing? What's the best thing? All these things we plan and we shake out these deals, and sometimes we get a little heated. I get, defend my side, but then at the end of the day, it's all for the purpose of, is this the right move?
Yep.
And so it's fun to do these things. Another thing and we'll probably end on this concept that I've been talking to a lot of guys lately, and I kind of had this epiphany. So I have a buddy that is very good at his professional career, and he could basically become an entrepreneur and sell his service, what he does, and probably as a freelancer and make really good money. And so we were talking, he wanted to get into rentals and buy rentals, and he's got this house hack that he's doing, and he's fixing up this rental, and he's doing this. His wife's getting mad at him because he's painting the wall and doing all these things to make $300-400 a month cash flow. When he could go out and literally go make $3,000 to $5,000 for these, teaching these people how to do something, right? Whatever he's doing, very easily, because it's a very in-demand service, and do really good at his job, or not be an entrepreneur and just be really good at his job, make a ton of money there. And give your money to an operator that is actually really good at operating, right? So it's the same way as I don't go do my own taxes,
right?
because I want to save some money. I give my money to a professional that saves me a lot more money, and I actually make more money in the long run. So don't spread yourself. Well, I guess the moral of that, don't spread yourself too thin. If you're really good at something and you really like it, focus on getting really good at that and making more income there. And then giving that more income, staying below your means, right? Giving that income to somebody else that is really good at what they're doing, like making money or protecting money. You know, there's different ways to invest. You can get in a rental long-term with a syndication. You can go do a development deal and get all these things. But there's different ways, and there's safer returns, right? But give it to somebody that's fucking good at that, right? And then at the end of the day, it's like, focus on what you're good at. I'm not good at talking myself down when I'm mentally unstable, which is a lot of times. Hire a counselor to do that. I'm not good at training. I hire somebody to do that. You don't want to cook. You hire somebody to cook and put it in your fridge for you. I don't want to do my laundry. I hire somebody to do that. Now, you sounds expensive to do this,
It's not.
but take little bites. It's actually way cheaper. It's like buying a really nice furniture compared to going and buying cheap furniture. You end up buying the cheap furniture way more times than you do the one nice piece of furniture.
Right, and I would add to that, like the cook you brought up, right? You were talking about health, and I meant to bring that up. So the cook will go to the store for me, will like cook all the food, deliver it, take the other dishes. I don't even clean the dishes. Take the other dishes away, clean them, reset the process, and she charges, I think, $50 over whatever her groceries are.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how long it takes to do that whole process,
I wonder.
but it's a lot. Yeah, and let's just say it would take me like hours and hours. Just say 4 hours. So unless my time is like sub $15 an hour, then that's.
Which I could argue it probably is.
So that's like, I think people, you know, and she loves cooking, and she's really good at good cooking, healthy cooking. To your point, delegate to someone who's really good at their niche. Pay them. You will net make way more money if you focus on what you're good at.
Yeah. Speaking of the cook, we went on a guy's trip with Tucker, you know, the Ben trip I told you about. We went there, and we were worried with COVID, like restaurants would be shut down. And so I'm like, screw it, let's hire a chef to make breakfasts and dinners for us. And it ended up costing like $3,300 for, 3 dinners and 3 breakfasts. That was worth, we probably would have spent, that was collectively for all 6 of us. We would have spent probably that easily on food and drinks and whatever, going out to eat. But not only that, the time it took to get, because we were a little bit out of time, the time it took to get there, the time it took to get back, we had the carpool, all these things. Literally, we sat there and we just talked and brainstormed and talked for hours and hours. The cook says, hey, when do you guys want to eat? 6:15. Okay, here's your appetizer. You guys can eat. We didn't have to, we literally moved 5 feet from the appetizer spot to the table. We did no dishes. We did nothing. We planned nothing. The value that was created in that, just from that extra time with that chef, was immense.
Right. And I think what you're really saying, if we go back to what you said about momentum, like when you stay in that flow, you're not like, oh guys, we're going to go to the grocery store now, and now we're going to get all distracted doing that. Oh, now we're going to cook. So half of us are cooking and half of us are just screwing around. We can't have a real meaningful conversation. You're keeping that momentum going for a relatively, for that group, small amount of money.
Exactly. Yeah. Unless you enjoy cooking. Like my wife enjoys cooking. That's something that relaxes her. Like I enjoy golfing. That relaxes me. So if you enjoy cooking, that's fine. Find other things that you don't enjoy doing that are
delegate those.
Our time sucks.
Yes.
You know, maybe her thing is, you know, talking to me. Maybe she can delegate that. So anyway, all right, guys. Well, we've been on the show for a while, kind of got on a tangent, but I just think those are really good things. So we'll go over them one more time. So professional proactive planning, PPP. OPP, you know me. So anyway, guys, hope you enjoyed this. And Jared, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, it's fun.
Banner going back and forth, bouncing this. I really enjoyed it. Maybe we have to let us know if you like Jared. Maybe have him on the show a few more times. I like doing these. I like doing the monologues. I like having people guests on, but I also like having these discussions because we would have these discussions anyway at lunch or at his house or whatever.
Like a normal conversation.
Yeah, like I don't even. There's cameras and microphones here, but actually I got a lot out of this. Jared took notes. Like we wrote things down, and there's things that we can both do better because he adds value and is way different than I am, and vice versa. I'm different than him, and we add value when we're together. So, and we do this all the time. We are proactive. We talk about being professional, how to get deals, and we talk about planning. Find some friends that can do that. Go have a good week.